Hey guys, and welcome to the FitPro Social with me, David Kyle.
And me, Ash Burley.
Good morning, everybody. How are you all today? Rainy, wet, miserable here in Cardiff. Ash, what's it like all the way in sunny Mansfield?
Not quite that sunny. It's foggy today. Very misty and foggy. Yeah, and a bit wet. Not too much. It's quite warm still, though. Strange enough for this time of year. It's actually quite warm, though.
Yeah, it's a unique one. Yeah, we've got a strange topic today. Like every time we start these, before we jump on, we always kind of have a chat. What should we talk about? This. What are we hearing from our audience and stuff? But an interesting one that popped up is staff stealing from you. Now, we're going to go in many different angles to this, but it's not just the most generalist of stealing protein bars. So I think we'll dive into it. Obviously, you guys watching, you're going to have your different thoughts on this, whether you agree or disagree, or like light bulb moments are going off. You're like, wow, yeah, I didn't think of it like that. But you will be surprised by how much staff actually steal from you legitimately or without even knowing that they're doing it. So Ash, why don't you kick us off? Let's kind of dive into it a little bit more then.
Well, I think we should dig into the non-obvious ones. I think kind of said there that, yeah, a staff member can nick a protein shake or protein bar and stuff like that. And to be honest with you, it's crap when that kind of stuff happens, but really that's not where the biggest impact's going to be. You know, at the end of the day, if someone nicks a protein bar, it's not going to have that much of an effect on your bottom line in reality. But there are bigger areas. So I think one of the most important things to remember about staff at all is that whenever you employ somebody or whenever you bring a team member in or anything like that, that what you're paying for is a return, just like your clients do when they come to your gym or your studio or hire as a personal trainer. They want a particular result, so they pay you some money in an expectation that they're going to get a return from that and the results and stuff that you could promise to help them get. Same thing happens when we employ staff. So we bring a staff member on, we pay them X amount per hour or per week or per month or whatever it is, and in return for that, we expect them to do certain tasks, certain roles, and certain jobs for us. And those certain roles and tasks and jobs will actually make your business more money. You know, there's the famous, Grant Cardone talks about the whole 10x. You know, whatever you pay for your staff member, ideally you want to try and 10x the return one way or another from them. And that's the basic principle behind this. And if we take that into account, then we can start to maybe see where staff might be actually stealing from in other ways. Really simple example is if you're paying somebody weekly or monthly and they turn up late for a session, as far as I'm concerned, they're still stealing from you. They are stealing your money because you paid them for something they haven't done yet. And that's going to have a ripple effect on the rest of the day, the rest of your staff, your clients, and so on.
Yeah, it's crazy because just the word stealing, it just means you've walked into a shop and you've taken something off the till and ran away without paying for it. And like you say, that's common practice in the gym. They'll probably steal bottles of water, or they will ask for bottles of water and you might say yeah, and then become a habit and they just keep taking them. Or you've got this really expensive coffee machine that you will let clients have one each and they're just abusing it where they're having 5 or 6 coffees. And you're clocking this, you know what, that's like £15 worth of coffees that they've had today. And you just think, oh, they're just a staff member, like that's totally fine. But that is like super easy stealing from you, like really straight up front. But like I said, being late for work technically is classed as stealing because you're still paying them. You wouldn't pay a painter to come in and they say they're going to do the whole job and then they only do 3/4 of it or 4/5 because they just had to leave early or they turned up late and they couldn't complete it, but they still want the whole money. You wouldn't pay that. And it's the same for your staff. And it is one of those unique kind of positions that as an employee, as the employer, you kind of let them get away with it because of how they're situated within the business.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, definitely. And I think the hard thing as an employer, I should say, is we have certain rules that we have to follow. Of course, we have to be fair in what we're doing, and we have to also accept that our employees are human, just like we are. You know, we make mistakes. I mean, Dave doesn't as a machine, but like I make mistakes, and our employees make mistakes. And I think sometimes they are going to be late. And I think this is where things like procedures and policies are really, really important because if they are going to be late, you want to make sure you have a clear policy and procedure in place for that, so that they know what this is beforehand. And by them understanding what it is beforehand, it decreases the chance of them being late. But also, if they are late, that you make sure you follow up on those processes and policies to reduce it from happening, because they might not see it as stealing from you, and you might not yet see it as stealing from you, but they are stealing that time from you. And it's not just that 10 minutes of being late, that 15 minutes of being late. If we actually think about how that can ripple out to all these other things. So let's say they were late for a session, and maybe it's a group session. So maybe you got like a small group, maybe you got like 4 or 5 clients in there. They're sat there around waiting. Now, they're either sat around waiting, or maybe you've got to get up and think, I've got to go and deal with this. So you have to go and take over that session. So not only have they wasted your money because you're paying them to be there on time, you've now had to stop what you're doing, which progresses your business forward, and put yourself in a position where they can go and deal with those clients. So it doesn't actually affect how your clients feel about that particular session. So already you've started losing multiple hours because you're having to not just deal with the time that's been lost by the late employee, you're having to use your time to deal with that situation. So it can start exponentially increasing the effects of this. So it's not just stealing that 15 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's half an hour, maybe it's an hour. And this thing can really quickly start to ripple over time.
Yeah, so there's kind of like the 4 main ones you want to think about. You've got obviously the financial theft, where they're actually putting their hands into the till if you have something like that, or they're falsely claiming their expenses. It can be hard to see how maybe you would pay expenses running a fitness business. Maybe you pay for their travel and stuff, and they're just bumping up their mileage and stuff like that, or they're just adding hours to their timesheet if that's how you pay. So you've got financial theft. Then you've also got product theft, what we talked about earlier, taking protein powder, taking bottles of water, having 5 or 6 cups of premium coffee, which is costing you. But then there's other ones like we kind of digged into it a bit now. So you've got intellectual property theft. So this could be stealing your client database. This could be stealing how you run the process of the business, your SOPs, maybe your onboarding process. And then the final one is time theft, which we've talked about here, okay? Logging extra hours or claiming those extra hours, or not doing the work while actually being paid at work, if that makes sense. So they go to the toilet, but they're at the toilet for like 45 minutes, and you're like, wonder what's going on here. So they're kind of like the 4 real types of thefts that we really need to be really aware of in the business. Because if you're working at, let's say, Tesco's or something, and you sat at a till, because it's been not busy, they're probably going to say, do you want to just go home? And you're just not going to get paid for those hours. Mm-hmm. Whereas I remember when we had the gym and there was nobody here for the last session, we'd just say, oh, just tidy up and just leave. And we'd still pay them. We made that conscious decision, but once or twice it happened, then they decided not to tell us anymore, and they would just lock up and leave as well. So again, that's theft. They've not got consent from us to leave. Mm-hmm. They should still be in the property or in the premises until that time that you stop paying them has arrived.
The time theft one I find a really, really interesting one. I think the IP theft as well, I think it's definitely worth digging into, because I think we've both had experiences with that in the past. I think it's worth exploring a bit more. But the time theft I do find really quite interesting, because sometimes it's blatantly obvious that they're nicking time. Like people just lazy, think I can get away with this, so they get away with it. And that is down to us really as business owners to figure out how to deal with that. And we'll talk about the red flags and warning signs that we can use and procedures we can do to deal with that in a moment. But I think the other side of it is the stuff they don't know about. So, for example, going to the toilet and sitting down there for 45 minutes, like they're wasting time in there, they could be doing something else. And this is quite an interesting one. So, I think some people might know this or might not, but my parents own a business. They own a manufacturing business, so nothing to do with our industry. And obviously, I kind of grew up in that environment. So I learned a lot about business, staff management, and things like that when I was quite young. And I can remember it wasn't maybe 7, 8 years, 9 years ago, something like that. And I was speaking to my dad and my brother. So my brother runs the business as well. And they were talking about ways of dealing with productivity, increasing productivity. And we actually noticed something really, really interesting. It was around the coffee machine. And I know you mentioned the coffee machine earlier. So they didn't have a machine there to start off with. What they used to do was make coffee. And we actually had a look at like, well, how much time are they spending doing that? So every now and again, someone would go make coffee. And they had 12 members of staff on the shop floor at the time. So one person will go out there and make 12 cups of coffee. And that might take them, for some people, maybe 15 minutes, 10 minutes. But they won't just go back to work. They just go back and stay there the whole time. And there were certain people that worked there that maybe before lunch would have been around 12:30, but at 12 o'clock they just stop what they're doing. They go and sit there, make coffees for everyone, and that became that person's habit. So for 30 minutes they lost. So effectively that person got like an hour lunch. Now all the costings and things for the business were around 30-minute lunch here, 15-minute break here, and not making those coffees. So of course you could go to your staff and you could say, well, we can't keep doing this. We've got to figure something out. That's going to lower morale and all that kind of thing. So we did the numbers. We actually worked out what the hourly rate was for our staff members and what they brought into the business. And then once we figured that out, we realized actually that's quite a lot of money. It's probably cheaper to go and buy an actual coffee machine. So that's what we did. They went and brought a coffee machine. So now they just go and get themselves, help themselves to what it is. And the cost per cup was so much cheaper than the lost hours. So these people were indirectly stealing time. They didn't know it, but they were paying, from a business owner's perspective, they're paying attention to what's actually happening with the numbers. And then we found an alternative way to actually deal with it that still kept up staff morale and stopped them from stealing. So sometimes it's not as obvious as you might think. They might not know they're doing it, but there's definitely things you can do as a business owner to deal with those situations. And that was just one example of what happened at my family's business.
Yeah, it's a tough one because we have, sometimes you just can't prevent it. For example, in the incubator, we always tell our clients that they need to have a staff member turn up 15 to 20 minutes before the session starts, and they need to create a end of session report. That's basically an insight into what happened in that session after every session. A little bit painful, but it's like 5 questions, super easy to fill in. But by getting that content done, you have so much more information. But if the person turns up a little bit late and your clients are already there before them and the clients are just stood around, that's upsetting your client. So this is now the impact of your business. If the person's like, I really need to be somewhere for 5 o'clock and my session finishes at 4 and it's going to take me about an hour to get there, I need to kind of get this session finished just before 4, so then I can be out of there 2 or 3 minutes. So they start rushing clients to get the session done, and they start ushering the clients out the door before that hour or 45 minutes up because they need to get out of there. And these are them where you really need to start seeing the warning signs are clearly to see, and then you start seeing the impact on the business. Like if they're there hammering this coffee machine, and then you bring somebody in for a consultation, like, do you want a coffee? We give all our clients coffees. And then you go to the machine and there's like no coffee. Then again, that's another impact on your business. Or they're hammering the bottles of water that you're buying that you give away to your clients for free, but they're really just abusing that policy. And then your clients have got a really heavy, hot session and they all need a bottle of water and there's none left. And you realize that this staff member's actually got 13 kind of half-drunk bottles over by his bag and stuff. Again, warning signs and impact on the business. It's huge. Yeah,
it's one of those things that it's very difficult, I think, when you start out business relatively early. It's one of those things you don't really think about.
No.
I can remember having a conversation with one of our clients on our group calls, and was talking about certain things that people stress about in businesses. And normally, that when you first start out in the business, the thing you tend to stress about is cash flow. It's like making sales and bringing cash in, and probably bringing leads in and things like that. And then as your business starts to grow, it starts to shift. Yes, that's the priority. It's the priority. You need cash in your business. You need to make sales. But generally speaking, you start having the systems and processes to deal with that and handle it. And I think the biggest stress after that, by far, as your business grows, is staff. It always has been for me. Like, I know the other stuff I can deal with that. At the end of the day, I can build a system and process that does that for here or there, most likely predictably for the business. Staff, though, are humans. And because you've got human nature involved, it's very difficult to predict. There are things you can do. There's definitely strategies we can do, but staffing just becomes an absolute nightmare. And I always find that really interesting, those conversations. When you speak to business owners at that level, it's always the same: staff leaving, staff changing, staff nicking, staff just not doing the job properly, staff wasting my time, staff taking up my time. It's
yeah. Staff lose their motivation, so they start dropping their performance that they're doing. So you need to get them back up, and then you need to update the handbook so that policy or that thing doesn't happen again. And then you've got all these other rule changes in the government and the country that then you need to implement to get the staff on board to follow those new practices, or Facebook update how they do their things in the algorithm. So we've got to teach the staff. You can't grow a real successful business without staff. And like when I'm saying this, you don't need to employ full time. And me and Ash were laughing about a post we saw the other day where this person said that he'd grown his online fitness business to a certain level without staff, and that was the first part of it. And then as you worked your way through it, it said, "Oh yeah, I did have a VA that was working 10 hours for me," and it's just like, so you did have a staff member working for you. So like to grow any successful business, you need help. You need other people supporting you, and that is known as staff. So even if
Yeah.
they're not full time, they could be part time. They could be working 1 hour a week. If you have a cleaner that comes in, technically they are a staff member. They are helping you out.
Mhm.
So to really grow and move to those next levels, to give you your time back, to earn you money where you don't have to be physically in the building, you're going to have to put staff into the business to make this work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I tend to try and I call it these days building a team. I think sometimes staff confuse people. They think I have to employ somebody, and it's not. You can have self-employed people. You can actually bring a cleaner in, even to the extent of like hiring an accountant to do stuff. Yeah, it's a different service you're
Yeah.
paying for, but you're still building a team. Nobody, I don't care who's listening to this. You might be new in business, or you might even think you've been around for a long time. Nobody's ever been self-made, ever. They've always had help or support from somebody, whether that's in your business or even outside of your business. It might be that you've got a partner who supports you, not gone down the career they wanted to because they want to support you instead. Like there's always somebody that's there helping you. And I don't care who you are. No business has ever been fully self-made. No business has ever grown to those high levels of success without staff, without support, without a team. I wish I'd sit in. I bet every single penny I've got if someone can prove me wrong. But I'm pretty sure no one could. Pretty sure no one could.
So we've talked about impacts now, and then you kind of did touch on about prevention strategy. So obviously in your parents' place, they kind of saw the warning signs, they saw the impact it was having on the business, and then they put a prevention strategy in place. So let's dive in a few of those. So like for us, when we had the gym, in their handbook and in their contracts, it said they had to arrive 15 minutes before a session started at the minimum. So if the session started at 9 a.m., they would have to be there for 8:45. Was that 15 minutes paid? No. But it was part of the contractual obligations that if they want to work with us, they have to arrive 15 minutes beforehand. That meant then there was no rushing, no walking in with 2 minutes to go, not having to unlock the door with all the clients waiting outside. Again, we've seen the issue, we fixed it. Now, if we're talking about clients who need to rush off home and things like that, again, try and look at what you can do. Coffee wise, you can say, yeah, you're allowed 2 coffees a day, and that's it. Agree on it. If you decide to have more, that will be auto docked from your salary, or we will send you an invoice for it. Again, you have to have hard, tough conversations with your staff. You have to have these conversations. It's not easy. It's awkward. It might be difficult because it could be your wife. And she's stealing, and she doesn't even think that she's stealing, yet she's drinking 20 cups of coffee a day. And you're thinking, how much money is that taken away from the business? So prevention, once you've kind of seen this issue, then you need to really look at how can we fix this so it doesn't happen again.
Definitely. I think that wife one's quite an interesting one. I've seen this in a few different businesses before. And I think it's quite easy to do it. If you've run a gym or a studio and it's you, and I think you're the business owner, and yes, it might be a separate business, and it is a separate business, and you have to kind of keep that business and personal side apart. But sometimes when you bring a partner in, a wife and a husband in, whatever, and they might not see it that way. They will see it as, oh, well, Ash, you put all this money into this business. You've invested this. This is our money you put into this. This is my stock, not the business's stock.
Becomes a lifestyle business almost then, really, yeah, where you live for your business, yeah.
Exactly. You're living for your business, and you have to try and shift that mentality. I think that's an important thing to go and do. And I'll be honest with you, there's times that we've done that. There's definitely times I've done that with my parents' business
100%.
before, and it's fine. But I wouldn't just go and do it. Like I wouldn't walk. I mean, theoretically, I probably could. I could walk down to my dad's place, my brother's place, and just go and do what I wanted there. Like they wouldn't be bothered. But I'd never ever do that because I need to tell them because I don't know what things are for. I don't know what they're using them for. I don't know if it's actually having a huge impact on the business, me doing something there. As you know, like I do it sometimes. I did it when I did some work around the house here. Like they've got a massive workshop, so I'll go and use it. But I wouldn't just walk in there and do it and steal all their stuff and use their equipment because I don't know what the impact's going to be. So I'd have to make sure I'm doing that correctly, and they can decide then whether that's the right move for them to go and do. But I think a lot of this really comes down to what you said at the very start of that, how to kind of these prevention strategies, which you have to be ridiculously clear on what your policies and procedures are, to the point where it's almost quite anal about it, as in this is exactly what's going to happen. So your coffees, for example, if it's becoming a big issue, then get a coffee machine that uses cards. Give everyone a card or a fob that has 2 or 3 things on it. You can tap it. Once they're used, you don't have to pay, and the machine will take the money from you. That's one way of doing it. I've seen other companies do that before in the past. It's a way of actually controlling it if you can't trust your team enough to stick to those rules. Same for like the stock and things like that. Do regular stock management. If you notice the stock's going down, and then the policy will be, okay, who was in charge of the stock at that time in that period? Okay, let's go and speak to that person who was on the till and whatever. What's happened? So you make them responsible for that situation to try and deal with it, and have these processes in place, and just make it clear that if these strategies that you've got in place, these policies aren't being kept, make it clear what the consequences are of that as well. And yes, as Dave says, it can feel a bit harsh sometimes, especially early on in business as you bring people on. Like a lot of time, you bring on people you'll bring on maybe friends to start off with. And if that's the case, you still have to do these things because it's a business. And if you don't do these things, I promise you it's going to come bite you in the arse later down the line. It always does.
And that's where we move on to like the fifth part here then really is handling thefts when discovered. Like you have to confront your staff on this, otherwise they will take advantage of you. And like we were saying earlier, then the impact on the business is going to be even greater. Maybe they start to get rid of clients early because their session finishes at 8 p.m. and they want to go home because they've had a long day, and they start shifting clients out at 5 to 10 to. They start getting miserable towards the end of that session. They start being aggressive towards the end of that session. And then you start wondering, wow, my 7 to 8 session is really dead at the minute. So you're just like, oh, just go home this once, that twice. And then before you know it, they're leaving at 7, but always getting paid for an extra hour until 8. You have to confront it. It is difficult. It is going to be awkward, but also depending who you are, you might treat it completely different. Like if you have a commercial gym and you've got a PT just letting all their mates in and stuff, you might deal with that completely different to me with a small group studio where one of the trainers drinks too many coffees every single day and is drinking the profits basically. Handling it is always difficult, but it has to be done. It has to be swift, because once it's dealt with, your stress levels will then come back down. And that is it. If you're stressed all the time, it's just going to keep working away at other stuff. And this one person who's doing this one thing is making your mind fester on that thing. Plus it will work on the other things, which you're then not given enough time to because you're thinking about that too much. And before you know it, not only are they costing you clients, but you're not focusing on your marketing, not making sales, you're not helping retention, and your business really starts to go down a slippery slope.
Yeah, it's exactly that saying, isn't it? You just have to pull the plaster off and get these things done. I think they say, don't they? Anxiety is just the fear of a decision that's not been made yet. You just haven't done that thing you need to go and get done, so you become anxious about it. And it really is important in those situations just to deal with it head on. And I think the sooner you deal with it as well, even though it's a painful thing for both parties sometimes, it's a hell of a lot less painful to deal with it early on than what it is.
Yeah. That's so true. That
on the line. In any part of life, this is a good life lesson for anybody, not just in business. Like, just deal with it head on, deal with it as soon as possible.
The longer you leave it, the harder it's going to be. You're like, oh, I can't do it now. I should have done it weeks ago when I first noticed it.
Yeah, it's a very it is tricky to do. It's a tough thing to do, and that's probably also why I think some people make out business owners to be these kind of hard, tough people. And I think sometimes you have to be. I think sometimes you have to put on this persona. Sometimes you have to put on a bit of a thicker skin sometimes to do these things and take it. And it feels like it might be a bad thing to do, and it can feel nerve-wracking when you're doing it, especially the first couple of times you'll do it. But it does get a little bit easier because you realize on the other side of that discomfort, the other side of that pain is actually where it all goes away because it's dealt with. And I promise you, most of the times it's never as bad as you think. If you deal with it early enough, the staff member will go, oh, sorry, I just didn't even think about this. I didn't realize it. And you can say, okay, well, it's in here. Just maybe recap what's in your procedure policies. This is what we do as a reminder. Let's just make sure it doesn't happen again. And that can be an okay way to deal with it. Sometimes it's just not as bad. It might be, though, that you have those conversations with people and they start to feel more stressed, to get a little bit defensive and things like that. But that also tells you something else. It tells you something else is going on. And I think it's important as business owners to, if you're employing staff, to start understanding some of the things the staff is going through, especially if you have a small group gym where you've got a small team of people. Yeah, if you've got a big commercial gym, you probably can replace them easy enough and it probably don't come to an issue. But I think if there's other things going on outside of work that are starting to affect how they're doing their job, and that's then costing you because they're stealing time from you and things like that, then you need to start having those conversations. But either way, whatever happens, once you have that conversation, you know you're on the right path to get it sorted. It's probably going to be a relief for them as well, because you can then help them deal with that situation and make sure that doesn't affect your business in the long run as well.
Yeah, like having those tough conversations, because you never know, that person might have been wanting to hand their notice in for a while, and if they've been unsure how to do it, and just having that conversation is allowed to that. But thinking like what you were saying there, I'm thinking back to the years I've obviously been doing this now. I think a lot of the time where these problems come from is because we didn't have the initial frameworks, foundations, processes, contracts, handbooks, KPIs in place initially. And I think this is where it comes from. If you don't set your stall out from the word go, then you're basically leaving the gate open for absolute carnage. And this is exactly the same with clients. You bring a new client in and you don't explain to them how to deadlift properly, how to use the rowing machine, how to put the rowing machine away, how to tidy the weights up, how to check in, and how to do all this other stuff. You know from experience now, the chances of that person staying long term is going to be limited. So I think you have to take it on the chin. You have to learn this lesson quickly and put the foundations, the frameworks in now. The longer you leave it, the worse it's going to get. And even if it's just a complete reset, guys, really sorry to do this. Dave and Ash has told me to do this, so it starts today. But here's your contracts, which you've never had before. Here's a handbook, which you've never had before. Here's your KPIs, if you've never had before. It's only going to benefit the business, which is then going to benefit you because you'll get paid more. I need you to all agree to all of this. If you don't agree to any of this, unfortunately, we will have to move you on. But moving forward now, Dave and Ash has forced me to do these things. Blame us, like that's totally fine, blame us. But once you put this stuff in place, your staff know the rules then. Like, you know, if you drive more than 70 miles an hour on the motorway and the policeman catches you, you're getting points. You're getting a fine. Yeah. There's like no questions about it. But if a staff member drinks 10 cups of coffee today, your premium stuff, and you catch him, they're probably like, well, he's not going to say anything, is he? So let's just carry on doing it. And that's because you haven't put the processes, the frameworks, the contracts, the KPIs, the handbooks, and all this stuff in place at the start. And like you said, maybe they didn't even realize that they weren't allowed to do it. Maybe they hadn't even thought that that actually was stealing from you. It just hadn't clicked because you'd never told them.
I think an interesting thing to talk about now might be the other side of this. So we've talked very much about these tangible things. He's very clean cut, black and white. This is the procedure for this. This is the policy for this. This is the KPI for this. There's another side of this that becomes more and more important, I think, and the more experience you get with it, with dealing with staff and running businesses with staff, is culture. I think it's important to build up the right culture within your business as well, because that can impact what happens. And yes, you can have all these firm things in place, but if you have the wrong type of culture in your business, if people believe they can bend these rules slightly, then they're going to bend these rules. They're human. At the end of the day, they will bend these rules to get as far as they can do. So it's important that you kind of snip the buds off, if you like, when those things happen, and build a culture that bending rules is not okay. You have to go and stick with this. But likewise, you also need to build a culture where people are willing to come and speak to you, to have open communication, to be able to say, actually come to you with their problems, with their grievances. If there's things they're not happy about, things they're not sure about, things they're struggling with, they should be able to come to you or the relevant person in your business and have that open conversation. And if they can do that early enough, a lot of these issues don't become an issue, because it might be the fact that, okay, yes, like Dave, I completely get this. Like, I know I can only have this bottle of water, or I can have this. I know we're using coffees and drinks all the time here, but it's like, yeah, I've only got 2 bottles of water here, but I'm really struggling to, like, I need to get more liquid in. I don't have time because I've got too many sessions on all the time to go out and grab my bottles. It's just easier for me to go and grab that bottle and fill it up. Now, if you know that as a business owner, you can maybe start dealing with it. You think, well, actually, maybe we can increase the amount we give them. Maybe we need to think about how we structure up our sessions so it gives people enough breaks in between it to actually go and have 5 minutes to fill up their water bottle and carry on with it, and not just have to run and grab something from the fridge to get back into the session as soon as possible because maybe we haven't planned out the day properly for them. So there's other things you can think about, other things we should be looking at here around the culture of the business, as well as just the hardline procedures and KPIs and policies.
Hey guys, we're going to take a real quick break here now.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. So if you're loving this episode and want to listen more often, then please make sure that you like and subscribe by clicking one of the buttons around wherever you're listening or watching this right now.
Perfect. Cheers for that, Ash. Let's get back to the episode. Yeah, so one of the things that we implemented was quarterly staff reviews, appraisals, whatever you want to call it. This is where we go through all their KPIs. We also go through their needs and worries. We also go through their desires and goals. And this is every 3 months. And it comes around really quickly. But then having the contracts, the handbooks and the KPIs, then having the quarterly reviews and refreshing their memory on those things, they're up to date with the latest stuff that they need to know about in regards to how your business works. Remember, it's your business, how your business works. And you can catch any kind of like slippery slopes that are starting to appear. So if they're always nailing their client retention scores, maybe you've got a client retention score of 7 out of 10, that's the minimum it can be. And then you now start to notice next month it's only a 6. So before that drops to a 5 or a 4, you can quickly say, okay, in the next quarterly catch up, we're going to talk about staff retention and why that needs to be fixed to get that back up to a 7 before these things. And like you say, it's just about catching it early, but having those conversations, having those weekly staff meetings, things that you just think, oh, my team's not big enough. It's only me and one other person. And it's a bit weird doing a staff meeting when it's just me and this other person I employ. But it's not, because if they don't know, and same for you, if you don't know either, because you could be the one stealing from your business because you just haven't thought about, I pay £50 a month for this coffee machine and I get all that stuff. But then by the time you drank it, and you could have earned 150 quid because it's £3 a cup or whatever, like, look how much money you could have earned, but instead you drank it all instead. So yes, it is a very interesting subject.
Yeah, I love it as well. I think on that kind of that culture side of it as well, and having those regular reviews and getting people involved with those decisions, I think that's quite an important thing to do. I think when you have these reviews, these appraisals, you use a scoring system like, because it's very clear when you have those scoring systems, it makes it easy for them to understand. It also means you can get them involved with those situations.
Yeah.
Like I was a big believer on, admittedly, sometimes I might go around the table and say, let's share one's ideas. And then the day I might just do my idea anyway. But the fact I've listened matters. And I think it's important to build up this level of trust between all your employees so they can share ideas, show that you're taking things on, and show that together as a team, because that's what it is. Your employees are a team, and your employee's job, as I kind of talked about at the very start of this, you're paying them to help you make more revenue for your business. That's the only reason you employ people, is to help you make more revenue for your business. And that can be freeing up your time. It can be whatever. And that, I think, you always need to remember. And if you can get people involved working together as a team, that's going to help progress the business forward. They're more likely to stay with you longer because they feel valued, which I think is really important. But the other thing it helps you do is something Dave talked about at the very start of this, which is about IP and people stealing IP, stealing clients, stealing procedures, stealing processes. Now, we can do whatever the hell we want in our contracts. In reality, if somebody leaves and takes our stuff, are we really going to do anything about it? And is it worth going through that process? Because it can be very difficult. It can be very costly. It can be very expensive. We can make it difficult for them. But is it worth putting all that energy and effort into doing that? Or is it worth putting that same energy and effort into just developing the business and just doing a better job than what they'll ever do? To me, that's where I'll normally focus my energy on it. Unless it's having a huge impact on the business, of course. But most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time it doesn't. But if you can build this culture of trust around it, it means if people do leave and you have a good exit strategy and an exit process for your staff when they leave, which maybe we can talk about in a minute, because I think that's a very important thing to David talk about a little bit. If you have those things in place, it's less likely that they're going to do something that's going to have that level of impact on your business. It's less likely they're going to go and steal your clients. It's less likely they're going to go and steal any other IP that you might have. And that comes down to the culture and the level of trust that you build in your business. And that's done through things like Dave's talking about, their regular reviews, listening to your team, listening to your staff, having a space where people feel comfortable communicating with each other. I think it's such an important part of having a staff team.
That's a difficult one. What we did on that topic was we basically restrict. We don't do it in a nasty way or a horrible way or anything. We just restrict what areas staff have access to. So, say the coaches on the gym floor, we had them, one would program all the sessions, the other one then would just be the coach under him. Both of them had access to the booking app, and then they had one spreadsheet which told them who their assigned clients were. So together they had their assigned clients, and that is all they had access to. They didn't have access to Lead Deck, where they could access all the clients' names and emails and phone numbers. When they logged into Team Up, which we used, again, we just ticked a few boxes that they only had access to. So they knew who the person was that was attending, no contact details, no nothing. Because as genuine as staff are and as nice as they are, once their head turns, there is really no way back. And this is the same for clients. Like, if you do a bad job in the first 2 weeks, it's very difficult to convince clients to stay long term. Mm-hmm. And once a staff member's head turns, it's really difficult to convince them not to leave, basically. And then you are going to have some who will just try and take advantage of you. But again, I think that advantage comes down to what we talked about at the start. You didn't put the contracts, the handbook, the KPIs, the quarterly reviews. You didn't put all this stuff in place at the start. So they think they can dominate you and try and steal, like you say, your IPs, your contact list, your Stripe information, all that type of stuff. But no, for us, whatever role you came into, that was all you had access to. Even the same here now. The media buyers, they know their clients, and by the side of their client, it says their payment dates, but that's it. They don't have the client's email addresses. They don't have their address, like postal addresses. There's loads of stuff they don't have access to, because that's how we've done it. We've just basically said, this is what you're allowed to see, and this is what you're not allowed to see.
That's perfectly smart and exactly what I would do as well. I think as much as you can build a culture of trust and you want to be open in communication and things with each other, I think that is extremely important. But likewise, you shouldn't give everyone that works here access to everything. One, there's the data side of it. They just don't need to know it. And all that's going to do is distract them from what they need to do. You just need to give people the tools and resources to do their job properly. A really good extreme example of this is, like, if I brought an employee into here, I wouldn't give them access to all my bank details for the company. I'm not going to let them go and spend money however they want to. It's not their job. Likewise, I'd only give certain people certain access. Like, we use VAs, for example, but they only have certain access to certain things. I don't give them access to everything, just like I have, or maybe Jed has, or Sarah has. So I think it's important that you do compartmentalize what they have access to. And one, because I think it helps them do the job better, stops them getting distracted. Two, it adds a level of security, because I think the important thing here is this culture of trust. Trust isn't implied, it's earned. So the more people work, the longer they work with you, the more they might progress in the business, the more access to stuff they might get, because their roles might change, their wages might change, because they're progressing through the business. And when they progress for your business, by definition, for you to give them more workload, to give them more responsibility in their roles, you're going to have more trust with them. So I think it's a very, very, very smart thing to do, to not give people access to stuff straight away. They have to earn that trust and earn that right to have that responsibility. Staff. Okay, like usual, if you enjoyed what we're talking about, you agree or disagree with what you're talking about, we'd love to know your thoughts. Do let us know in the comments. And likewise, if you want to come on to chat about these topics or any other topics that maybe you think are not highlighted enough in the industry, then do also let us know. But back again, same time next week, hopefully. Yeah. Ash, great speaking as always. Yeah, you too, man. Always a pleasure. Never a chore.
We'll speak to you all next week, guys. Appreciate your time. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the FitPro Social. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes.